right, welcome back everyone. Hopefully your lunch break was nutritious and fulfilling and rejuvenating. We're going to shift gears now. So this morning was focusing on the P and the E of the PRES model, and now we're going to go more internal, more self-reflective with the R and the S, so reaching out and self-knowing. And I want to focus on self-knowing first. So I have a question for you. What do you feel is the value of being self-knowing?
Self-regulate, or option to self-regulate, maybe, like you have more insight into what triggers you, what makes you react, as opposed to respond.
Nice. Yeah, having an awareness of what triggers you so you can manage it if needed.
Being, if you're self-knowing, you can communicate who you are more effectively.
Yeah, definitely. If that's something you're trying to achieve, which hopefully you are, absolutely.
Being comfortable in your own skin has its own words.
What do you mean by that?
I think you come to it, and I know, I mean, for me, it took a while. I think at a certain point you just say, I am who I am, and just I'm okay with not being liked about certain things. You're not going to please everyone, so stop being people pleaser all the time. In a sense.
Yeah. Yeah, self-acceptance. Feeling comfortable and confident in what you believe in, and not necessarily
being able to say no.
Yeah. Anything else?
I think it definitely helps to come to a result, knowing what your values are, that you drive your conclusion. Yes.
Definitely. Because it's what you believe in, specifically what you were sharing about having an understanding of what your values are. If you don't understand what you value, how can that, help you make an informed decision about how to communicate or how to connect with others? It's such a crucial element.
If you don't know yourself, how do you share yourself with other people, and how do you really get to know?
Yeah. So obviously, from our experience at Ariel, working with leaders and individuals all over the world, something that we always notice is that people who are more self-aware and have more self-knowing are the people who are able to get messages across more strongly, connect with people more deeply. And so it's something that we really like to explore. How can we better understand what our professional values are, what makes us tick, and what about our life informs what we believe in and how we want to communicate with others. So we have an exercise at Ariel that helps us get there, and I'm going to first share with you this quote that I have up by Noel Tichy. So Noel Tichy was a professor at the University of Michigan at their business school, but he's also been an executive coach to people like Jack Welch and Roger Rico from PepsiCo. And he shares that all leadership is autobiographical. If I don't know who you are as a person, I don't know who you are as a leader. So what we're going to do today is test the veracity of this quote and see if looking over our own autobiography can help inform our leadership presence. And the way we're going to do that is by focusing on an exercise called the River of Life. And I have my River of Life here. So I want you to imagine as if your life is a river, so it's ongoing and flowing, and it starts at birth and flows into the present day. And your life is defined by key people, places, and events. And so they sort of show up as either, rocks or islands through the river. And then like any river, there are tributaries, moments that break off. And these are defining moments in your life. So we have them divided here by affirming moments. So something positive or something that happened that perhaps helped you discover something about yourself, make a positive turn, make a positive change. And then challenging, something that happened to you that either questioned who you are or maybe formed a strength based off of that challenge. And there's usually, not a ton, a few key moments that stand out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my river of life with you. I'm gonna walk you through from birth to present so you can get a sense of what it is. And then after I'm done, I'm gonna invite you to draw your own rivers. So before you get ahead of what you're gonna draw, I want to invite you just to hopefully relax and just listen to my story, all right? So we'll start with birth. So I was born in Boston, Massachusetts, and I was raised in Melrose, Massachusetts. Some of you heard this, but that's actually the town that I'm in now. My parents are still in the same house that I grew up in, so that's still standing. I am, surprise, surprise, a middle child, bookended by two sisters, so older sister Kara and younger sister Laura, and very comfortable, happy, well-balanced household. My parents are still married. I think they still like each other. I hope so. I'm driving them to the airport for them to go on vacation today, so I'm sure that they still like each other. And, you know, just very middle class, very comfortable, never really in a situation where we weren't spoiled, but we never really wanted, you know, we never wanted for anything, if that's the correct saying. So very comfortable childhood. When my sister was about 6 months old, Laura, my younger sister, and I'm 2 years ahead of her, so I was probably around 3. They noticed that she was born with a genetic disorder that caused a liver disease. And the outcome of that would be that she needed a liver transplant to survive. And so a lot of my young childhood was spent with her in and out of hospitals. And because I was so young, I didn't truly recognize what was going on. My parents would go off on spurts where we'd stay with friends or a family member would come stay with us, and sometimes we'd go visit, but sometimes we wouldn't. And because I was so young, you know, only between 3 and 4 years old, I recognized that something wasn't right with Laura, but at the same time, that was my norm. And when I was, when I was 4, when Laura was 2, and this was on my parents' 9th wedding anniversary, they got the call that an organ was available at Boston Children's Hospital, and she had a successful liver transplant. And then things kind of went back to normal almost. She went through this major operation, and it was very successful, and we sort of went to what felt like for me a very normal childhood. The only sort of shadow on the side was my sister was a little bit more medically involved than most kids. So we had to pay a little bit more attention to cold and flu season, or if she got a bug, it hit her a bit harder than it would hit Kara or me. And it was just always that awareness of she was a little bit more sensitive to us than others, which, being a child of that age, I didn't really think of the nuances of that or the depth of that. In fact, I had major attention issues because of that, because sometimes my parents had to give their attention to Laura. And so I struggled with that as a child, but for the most part, you know, very happy, well-balanced childhood. And when I was in 5th grade, my school decided to start a drama club and put on a play, and they were putting on a production of The Wizard of Oz. And I had never done any theater or any performance before, but as I said, I craved attention. I would perform on top of my parents' coffee table, and they would yell at me to get off, and I would be singing all the time, and my sisters would be, "Drew, stop singing." And when they were putting on this play, I was like, oh my goodness, this is the moment I've been waiting for. I have to be Dorothy, or I'm going to die. I watched the movie over and over again. I felt it in every fiber of my body that I needed this. And I showed up, and this is elementary school. I showed up to the day of auditions, and I had my song prepared, America the Beautiful, and I had been practicing my skip, and all of the girls show up, and they're all dressed up as Dorothy for the audition. And I'm just in my regular clothes, and I'm I think, oh, I lost this moment. This is it. They're all dressed, they've got their little baskets with their stuffed animal Totos, and I'm just looking like a jerk in my jeans. And, but I auditioned, and I got cast as Dorothy.
Oh.
Yeah. So, and it was such an affirming moment for me, and it really was that moment where I thought, oh, this was what I was looking for. It was such a fantastic outlet for me to, you know, almost therapeutic. Like as a 10-year-old, I could be goofy, I could be silly, I could take risks, I could make funny faces, I could be loud, I could sing, and it was supported. And I really, for the first time, felt like I discovered a strength of mine, and with that, I discovered an outlet. So that place where I struggled with, you know, attention, whether or not I realized it, I had an outlet to put that into with theater. And luckily, throughout my school career, there was always opportunity to perform. So in middle school and high school, I did all the drama clubs and all the plays and all the different things, and I had such wonderfully supportive parents that they supported my wish to continue my study of performing arts and encouraged me to study theater in college. So I went to Adelphi in New York after school and studied theater, and it was fantastic. It was every itch that I could imagine getting scratched was being scratched. And not only that, I had the opportunity to study abroad in London and go to a theater conservatory and open my eyes to, you know, a whole new world, because otherwise I was just in the east coast of Massachusetts, you know, and never been to any other country. When I was in college, we got a letter, my parents, my family got a letter from Boston Children's Hospital, and they said that if somebody in your family received a blood transfusion between this date and this date, there is a chance that they may have been infected with hepatitis C. And my sister Laura got a blood transfusion during her transplant, so they went and got her tested, and unfortunately she was positive for hepatitis C. And in some cases it's inactive, in some cases it is active, and unfortunately her case was active. And the number one sort of, I guess, side effect of having active hepatitis C is liver failure. So it became prominent to us that a second liver transplant was probably in Laura's future because of this new element that was introduced to us. And so when I was in college, that became, you know, more of a reality. So we went through this big chunk of time from the time I was 4 to about the time I was 21, where things were fine, and then all of a sudden it sort of shifted to being medically involved again. So a lot of people don't know this, but you are 8 times more likely to need an organ transplant than you are to be able to be a donor. So donors, you know, there's a lot of tricky laws around it. There's, you know, some people aren't comfortable with marking being a donor on your license, and even if you are, they don't always necessarily, you know, take your organs, and it also unfortunately depends on the way that you pass away. So in terms of supply, it's very limited. And my parents read an article in a magazine about, you know, having access to an organ could all depend on where you live. And they realized that in Jacksonville, Florida, at the Mayo Clinic, the wait time for an organ is significantly less than in Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, you're probably waiting around 2 to 3 years for an organ, depending on how sick you are. And in Jacksonville, Florida, at the time, it was like 6 to 8 weeks.
Wow.
So
That's incredible.
it was pretty big. I don't know if it's changed since then. This was a little over, it's about 11 years ago. So my parents and Laura, who was 20 at the time, made the decision to relocate to Jacksonville, Florida, and, you know, enroll with the Mayo Clinic and wait for an organ there. And so in 2008, they went down for a few months, and unfortunately my sister Laura got too sick too fast, and on the day that an organ was available for her, she was unfortunately too sick to make it through the surgery, and she passed away. And I was 22 and she was 20, and my sister Kara was 24. And, you know, that was, you know, a very giant shift for us, a very giant crack. You know, it's just, you know, anybody who's experienced loss, especially within an immediate family, it's, you know, it's a piece of the puzzle is missing. So, and not only that, we were in a different state, so we had to go home and kind of pick back up where we left off as best we could. And that just, you know, it informed so much for me and how I live my life, and, you know, just losing a sibling, and in terms of just the filter of life, like what you take seriously, and, you know, when to look on the bright side, and when to freak out and when not to freak out, and, you know, all these different elements. So that was, you know, a very, obviously a big moment for me in my life, was going through that. We have a wonderful community that just surrounded us when that happened and provided, you know, so much love and support for us. So that was really helpful. And she made, you know, a big impact, and we know a lot of people who've become organ donors since then, or have, you know, made different changes in their lives based off of her story, which is something that we really appreciate. So that was 2008, and that was an incredibly challenging year. And then 2009 came along and completely dramatically changed, you know, went in terms of the positive. So I got a job working for a touring theater company in New Hampshire. And the way that it works is they hire a bunch of guys and a bunch of girls, and they split them up into groups of 2, and they do 2-person plays all over the country, and they assign you a different region, and you drive there, and you go to different schools or libraries, and you perform these plays. They want to make sure that the tours are successful, so what they do is they have everybody fill out a personality questionnaire. So, you know, what do you like to do on the weekends? Are you a day person? Are you a night person? Because they want to make sure that the actors who are touring together for 3 months at a time are compatible. My tour partner and I were very compatible because I'm married to him today.
Matchmaker.
Yeah.
This is before
So,
Matchmaker.
yeah, it was like some sort of professional eHarmony.
What's the stats on that? Like, did a lot of people decide like that? 'Cause it is.
Yeah, there are a lot of romances that happened out of it, actually. Yeah. So I've met a few couples. I recently met a couple who have who have 2 children, and they met on tour. So yeah. I'm married to an adorable British man named Alex, that we met on tour, and I went from, you know, having a really challenging year to the following year getting to tour the United States in a car, to perform in theater, which was my love, and to fall in love all at the same time. So I had this really magical few months of getting to travel the United States, and, you know, grow with Alex, and, you know, and I toured with Hampstead on and off for about 2.5 years. And then Alex got into grad school at Brandeis, which is just down the street, and we decided, okay, let's, you know, settle down in Massachusetts. And so I was looking for a job. You know, I had worked in a variety of different administrative settings, and I'd worked in a variety of theater jobs. And then miraculously, I found this job that was somehow connected to both. At Ariel, that they were looking for somebody in an office management job at the time, and they said, you know, our roots are in theater, and this is what we believe in, and I thought, this is way too good to be true. And so I applied for the role, and I got it, and that's how I ended up here. And it's, you know, Brandeis is like 3 miles down the street, so the fact that I found this just felt kind of bizarre. And that was in 2011, so I've been with Ariel a little over 8 years now. And, you know, life has grown. You know, I got married. I ended up back in the town that I grew up in. And then in 2016, my niece Claire was born. And anybody who knows me personally knows that this 3-year-old is like the light of my life. I'm completely obsessed with her. I hope she feels likewise. And we all coincidentally live right down the street from each other. They live a block away from me, and then a block up from them are my parents. And that's sheer coincidence. I did not plan to live down the street from my parents. An opportunity presented itself. Same thing with my sister and brother-in-law finding their house. So it's really, if you told me when I was a kid that you would be living in the same neighborhood as your family in the town that you grew up in, I would have been like, no, I'm gonna be in Hollywood, I'm gonna be doing this, I'm gonna be doing that, like, see you later, but I couldn't be happier where I am. And now I have a ton to look forward to, because now I'm expecting a child, and honestly, it took us a while to get here. This is something that's been in the works for a while for us, and feels all the more sweet because of it, because we sort of are at this place. And I feel like the fact that she's due January 1st, and there's all this symbolism with like the beginning of the year, and you may feel the same way, about just starting fresh and starting new, and I just couldn't be more excited about what's to come. So that is my river. Oh, thanks. I don't have to clap, but I appreciate it. So in a moment, I'm going to invite you to draw your rivers. I'll give you about 20 minutes, and we have a ton of markers, and so you can get as colorful as you want. I want you to start at birth and go all the way up to the present moment, so please try not to go into the future. Because you never know what might happen, but I mean that in the best possible way.
Anybody see that? Let me know.
Birth to present, please divide it into people, places, and events. But feel free to get as creative as you want. You draw little items, you can make little rocks or islands or however you want. And then include at least, I would say, 3 for each. No need to do more unless you have to, but 3, I guess I have more. You can do 4 if you want. Affirming and challenging tributary. So this is something that was a turning point in your life that chose you to, make a certain choice or move in a certain direction, or to form a certain feeling or mentality about your life, whatever it may be. Let's see. So, in full transparency, after you get a chance to draw your rivers, I am going to invite you to share your river with a partner, with somebody else. Now, I know that there might be moments from your life that you're not comfortable sharing, and that's okay. You do not have to be the most open book in the world. The number one rule for me is do whatever makes you feel safe, but also practice moments of vulnerability, because that's also one of the things that we're practicing here. If there is a moment from your life that you do not feel comfortable sharing, but it really is some sort of pivotal moment, put down some sort of symbol or drawing or initial to acknowledge it, because you may not be comfortable sharing it with somebody, but you should at least honor the fact that it was a part of your life. So for here, I had another loss in my family happen that I'm not ready to talk about yet, so I put symbols there to represent. So whatever feels safe for you, just be open about some stuff. I don't want to see all symbols, so you have a chance to incorporate that. Let's see, am I missing anything? So keep people, places, events. We have lots of colors. Get creative as you want. Any questions? Okay, so I am going to, let me get some paper. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, and then we have, let's come stand in a circle and just hold our rivers up so we don't have to talk through them, but we can just get a sense of what everybody's look like. No judgment. I'm going to shut the door. Can you just get a sense of everybody's different so we can put those down, you can just sort of put those down to the side and have a seat for now. How was that experience drawing the river?
It's kind of hard.
In what way?
In multiple ways. Both sort of emotionally and dealing with things that maybe didn't go so well in your
Right.
life and what you want to reveal and not want to reveal,
Right.
and then also just in terms of what should I put on it,
Right.
It's what makes the grade.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you can put on as much as you want, but it's also determining what's that tributary too. Like, what are
Right.
those moments that stood out for you? But yeah, sometimes being self-reflective can be really challenging, especially when you're thinking about things that did not go so well. What else?
Just take some deep thought and thinking about the things that have, and I've gone through this exercise before. I don't recall exactly what I put on. I'm sure I put some similar things, but a lot has happened since I did this last time.
Yeah.
So who defined you and what events really impacted you is it's hard to go back and think about that.
Definitely.
It's happened for today's birthday, so.
Oh, that's right.
I actually, 46 minutes ago, turned 50.
Oh.
So just to really touch
Congratulations.
that growth to that moment was kind of.
Oh, gosh.
Today.
So,
And the fact that you were like doing this exercise.
Yeah.
while I
Like-
was.
Yeah, like-
Yes.
Wow.
Really into a decade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. Wow.
And there are things that, especially if I did the same exercise, say today was the same day,
Yeah.
but if I did it like with our BI team, I'm thinking about, all the things, when you're newly in a job, what you want to share, what you don't want to share, right?
Right.
Because there's comfort in sometimes in the audience.
Yeah, definitely. So in a moment, as I said, I'm gonna pair you up and you'll be sharing your river with somebody else. Before we do that, I wanted to talk a little bit about listening, specifically focus on the R of the reaching out before we transition into the next phase of the exercise. So specifically with listening, who do you find yourself listening to on a daily basis?
Clients.
Clients, yep.
My kids.
Kids, yep.
Husband.
Yep. Spouse,
Wife,
yep.
my boss.
Boss.
Yeah.
Yeah. You find yourself listening a lot. If you had to say, put the amount of time you spend listening at work on a percentage scale, what percentage of your time at work do you think is spent listening?
Not as much as it should be.
Okay.
Well, there's listening, sorry, I cut you off, but
I work from home, so.
Right.
I have hour or client meetings or conference calls, but there's a lot of quiet when you work from home.
Right.
So the listening is, why is the dog barking? Or why is the UPS truck on the street at that time? So
Right.
it's different listening.
Right. But it sounds like when there are calls or meetings, that probably a big chunk of that you spend listening.
Oh, yeah.
And even leading up to the meeting, like that quiet time is just doing research, which is like another kind of listening for the call that
Right.
you're going to have, so you're trying to get insight about who you're talking with, so to me it's always listening.
Concentrating.
Yeah.
sorry,
No,
I cut you
no.
off. I was thinking listening versus hearing. So, I hear my kids a lot, and I really do try to listen to them, but so often it's just like, like I hear them and I don't really listen.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a difference.
Definitely.
Big difference, right? So you want to really listen to your boss, right? And your kids, maybe not so. Oh, we fight all the time. It kills me. So I hear them all the time, and I'm not listening, or trying not to listen.
They're tweens, right?
Yes. 11
See, I
and
wasn't listening yesterday.
Just 11 and 13, they're so competitive and like fight over the stupidest things.
So it's probably safe to say that we do a fair amount of our time listening, whether it's listening or hearing or how we listen, but we do at work, especially a fair amount of time listening. So there are different ways that we listen. So I want to give you a scenario and just get a sense of how you picture yourself listening in this moment. you have a very close colleague. It could be a direct report, it could be somebody that you partner with often, and they rush into your office or workspace and they have a problem. And they're rattling off what the problem is, and you've got just a couple of minutes before you have to transition to the next meeting or call. How do you find yourself listening in that moment?
Not very attentive.
Not very attentive? No?
Because your focus is on the next meeting. Yes.
Yeah. So you feel like a little distracted? Yeah.
I might feel compelled to just say, I've got 2 minutes, we'll talk about this later, but I have to, that's what we have now.
Right. Yeah, like get to the point, or let's put this on pause. Yeah.
To some extent, it depends, right? I'm usually going from meeting to meeting, so
Yeah.
this scenario happens, and sort of who it is and what the issue is and how important that thing is versus the next meeting. And I might say, hey, I got a meeting in 2 minutes, we're gonna have to talk about this later. I might stop and listen.
Yeah.
Depends.
Probably depends what it is, yeah. So let's remove the idea that we have a meeting coming up. So we have, say if we remove that challenge and somebody comes to us rattling off that issue and that problem, how do you find yourself listening in that moment?
Asking questions.
Asking questions, yep.
Clarification
Mhm.
and slow down.
Yeah. Yeah. Getting a sense of like, yeah, what they're telling you, what the issue is, anything else?
To me, I tend to try to understand it and classify it.
Yeah.
Basically, like, hey, okay, I need to make sure I understand it, and then I'm gonna like say like something I need to pay attention to. It's sort of like, hey, you need to go talk to somebody else about this, or
Yeah.
whatever the outcome is. But that's the way I tend to
Yeah.
deal with things.
Listen to this.
Listen to fix.
I was gonna say, listen to understand, so how can I help?
Yeah.
Right, what are you expecting from me, or how do I fit into this, why are you telling me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's probably safe to say that a lot of us listen to fix or listen to understand, listen to help, listen to what we call it listening to solve a problem. And you know, a lot of us are hired in a particular role because we have to provide a solution to a particular problem. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the wrong way to listen, but there are also different ways that we can approach listening in different styles for potential different outcomes depending on what it may be. And what we're going to focus on today is the practice of listening for building relationship. So when somebody comes to you and presents something to you, how do you listen in this specific way, and how does that inform your response, rather than maybe a go-to listening for understanding or listening to solve a problem. So in a moment when you pair up, one person will share their river, and the other person is going to listen in a very particular style, listen for building a relationship. And you're each going to have a chance to go, so one person will go first, and then the next person will go. But it's all, you don't have to get it out, I'll talk through it first, but it's all laid out here. So when you pair up, one person will share their river, and partner B, you will listen for building relationship. So listen to your partner's river, have them talk you through it just like you were, and then I want you to reflect back after they're finished and cover the following things. So first, what moved, touched, surprised, or intrigued me was. What I heard as your strengths and values were. And what I heard that might relate to your leadership communication style was. So based off of their river and what you heard, what are your reactions to this thing, to these moments, and reflect that back to them. And then check back in with your river partner to get a sense of how that resonated. Did that, did you discover anything new? Was anything a surprise? Did anything, did you resonate with anything? So what we're going to do is we're going to practice this briefly with my river. So I want you to pretend like I'm your river of life partner, and I just shared my river with you. And I'm going to ask these questions, and feel free to respond whatever comes to your mind. But what was something that moved, touched, surprised, or intrigued you about my river?
We both what's going on, that you also went overseas to do this time blending, what are you looking for in your education and training?
Yeah.
That's, I mean, it's obviously a big approximate, but that just kind of, she also went overseas for education. That's cool.
I'd say most dramatically the challenges. Like, that's just, it's a lot to share. But I think it also definitely shows how it's defined.
I think the Wizard of Oz experience, I mean, that one clearly set you on your river and your journey in a completely different way. And if you hadn't gotten Dorothy, would you still have done that?
I know.
Would you be
It's a
here?
great
Yeah.
story.
Would you be here? And then obviously your sister and the loss of her and that whole process and how difficult, how challenging, and what an impact.
What did you hear as potential strengths or values of mine after hearing my river?
Love a family.
Yes.
Can you follow your passion? You've made your passion your focus.
And life has kind of set you up in weird ways, maybe the Wizard of Oz, and with this job even, like, you kind of reveal that in your story, or at least seem to have some sense that something's, at work.
Big love of people and risk in doing that tour experience. It takes a special person to be able to say, I'm gonna go on road with this one person for the next month. And it worked out pretty well for you, which is amazing.
Which is, yeah.
The silence of the lambs.
It could have been a much different story, yeah.
I'd say you have a lot of sort of inner strength to both take the risks that you did as well as overcome some of the challenges you've had.
Thank you. Anything in particular that might relate to my leadership or communication style?
Well, obviously, the theater background you had for 10 years,
Yeah,
so
definitely.
leads your communication style, and that's, that you have been able to take the stage from a very young age and communicate from the heart, which is something that so many people that have a passion for theater never get to use it throughout their life.
Yeah, very lucky.
I think also as a child, just that middle jamboree classic syndrome, craving attention. And I think it continues to inform your whole life. So, not that you seem to be desperate for attention, but I think you seem to be able to garner
But it's a part of who I
attention
am.
when you need to.
Mhm. Yeah. I've managed my craving of attention the past 30-something years, so. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you being so present and in tune when I was sharing my river, and yeah, I appreciate all the sentiments and things that you've noticed, and it's just nice to get that reassurance around just the communication and my passion, and definitely my connection for family and community too is something I really value. So it was nice to be heard. So what we're going to do in a moment is I'm going to break you up into pairs. I've actually decided the pairs because I'm going to take one person first, and then when we reach the halfway point, I'm going to put them with a trio. And I'm going to give you an hour total for this, so basically a half hour each. And so in that first half hour, one person will go and share their river, and partner, you'll listen in this style, so you have time at the end to reflect back all of these things, what you heard of them, and allow your partner to reflect what it was like to hear that. And then at the half hour, I'll chime in and you can switch, and then you'll change roles and do it all over again. Any questions about that?
Question about how we present, like, what are we trying to convey in our?
All you're doing right now is sharing
Just
your river.
sharing your
Yeah,
river.
there's no, I mean,
There's
we'll
no
talk.
like compelling. point to this.
Well, I mean,
There is,
we're going to, there's a method to the madness. And we'll get to all of those pieces. But right now, that first piece of the puzzle is just practicing, sharing your river with somebody else, but also, hearing the specific reflection back from your partner, but you also getting a chance to practice listening in this specific style and reflecting back. So that's what we're focusing on right now, and then we're gonna peel the layer throughout the afternoon.
Got it.
So I'm going to put Pauline and Carl together, and Denise and Dipka, and I want to take you for the first part, Tracy, if you don't mind. And then, is anybody comfortable with Tracy listening in second round to their river? If I brought her.
Oh, okay, right.
She can join us.
That's fine.
Okay, great.
That's,
Thank you.
Thank
Just so she gets a chance to go through that too, because she's already heard my river, so we're having her practice. Okay, so what was that experience like for you hearing it?
it didn't look hard, can I just say that, Carl?
Yeah.
You had a good flow with it, and I think you gave good enough detail. We asked a few follow-up questions as you went through, but it didn't look like it was so hard, but putting it to paper is hard, I get it, right?
Yep.
And sharing with Drew my story, we got into some deep details. It's emotional. You're hitting some sensitive nerves or experiences there that I don't know if you ever forget them, but it's just bringing it back, I guess. But I think it's insightful, and to be able to make the connections on where you started and where you are today. I think we had really a good conversation about that. I got this from Drew for sure. I didn't really make the connections that she did, and having somebody else see it helps.
Yep. Thank you.
They did a really good job in working with her, and I sense it would be somewhat of a challenge. I mean, for those of us, we kind of had some prep on this concept of the river of life, so I had looked through what it actually, I wanted to go through it as much blind as I could, but had heard this exercise, so it's really kind of like changing a lot of people's stuff, and I'm like, oh gosh. I know I'm gonna have to share these things, so it's like that build up.
Yeah,
Like
anticipation.
Yeah.
What was it like having the experience of somebody reflect back to you what they heard about your river? It was nice? What was nice about it?
Well, I think I noticed I was much more comfortable sharing my affirming side than my challenging side. And once I did that, for someone to reflect back, and with acceptance and with just kind of neutrality, it was like not good or bad, it was more like this is what I heard.
Yeah. And it was nice.
Yeah.
Great. Any other thoughts of what it was like to hear somebody reflecting back, especially when it's about your strengths or your values, your leadership style? Any surprises? Any observations?
I appreciated you listening and giving your insights on what I shared. It's affirming. It's gives you. There's no right or wrong, right? In life. It's just acceptance and just being open to it and giving your feedback, making the connections again that I didn't see. I thought that was. I appreciated that. That's why. never thought about that before.
I think Carl picked up on one thing that went from my strengths and values to my leadership communication style. That while I've mentioned it before as something that's important to me, I never realized that how important and how it comes through. And that was kind of, so I actually, that other people are seeing that was kind of nice and affirming. As you said, it was really kind of that acceptance of things was really good.
Yeah. So feeling a lot of this word affirming come out when
It was a surprise that was what kind of got pulled through.
yeah.
So.
So what impact do you feel this style of listening brought to the conversation?
You develop a caring for somebody else that you probably, well, obviously we didn't have 24 hours ago because you didn't know each other. But certainly it's something to kind of start listening for it a little bit, so people share. And yes, I had that, or I had that, and it's trying to map their own kind of river, and drop in your own points on somebody's, river of life, kind of go, okay, well, they had that, and that was good, and that was good, and kind of maybe create your own vision of somebody else's river of life.
Right.
Helps to connect with them.
Yeah. Yeah, building stronger relationships, stronger connections.
Yeah.
Trust, maybe.
Yes, trust.
We have
Yeah.
a greater connection now,
Yeah.
and trust opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think, thank you for dividing up the groups the way you did, because I think it's probably really great that you two did that, so that you strengthened that bonding.
Yeah.
So you become stronger and.
We're going to be working very closely together,
Oh,
as
yeah,
you can
that
tell.
really is.
That was a little strategic on my part. So. And you're saying trust too, that popped up for you.
Well, you both, you need to trust people to do that, right? Period. So, you're putting yourself out there and
Right.
trusting them, and that's that's the foundation of any relationship, is
Yeah.
that level of trust.
Right. And why is trust so important in our working relationships?
Why aren't people against that?
Yeah.
Impact the rest of your life. You spend a lot of time with them, obviously.
Right.
Yes.
But they also can make or break your personal life too.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Either even if your significant other, most of us are, both of us are married, if you have that other person in your life has ever had a really bad working relationship or a bad boss, that impacts not just the person who has the bad boss, but it ripples through the rest of the family.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it can ripple through the culture of an organization as well.
Oh, it definitely
Lack of
does,
trust,
but,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
for the individual,
Yeah.
watching it.
Definitely. Well, the saying, a lot of, there's a very common saying that people don't leave jobs, they leave managers.
Yes.
And you may be inspired today. Tracy and I were talking about this of like, where else can we do this exact exercise with some other team members? And at the same time, you don't necessarily have to map out your entire life story for someone. So what elements of this exercise can you take away with you, whether it is to build stronger connections, to develop more trust within your team members, to present vulnerability as a strength where appropriate? Where can you see yourself using this?
I mean, I think you can use this with anybody you want to build a relationship with, basically.
Yeah.
And it's about being able to put yourself out there and, to some extent get them to put themselves out there as well, such
Yeah.
that you can build a level of trust
Yes.
and start that relationship from a good place.
Yeah. Yeah, building that foundation of trust.
I'm wondering if there's a way to do a mini exercise of this that can be done in a very short amount of time to give a taste of it to a client. I don't know, Tracy, if you've got any, to be able to give a teeny taste of what this is like in terms of giving the exercise and saying, we do this in a longer stint, and this is what people get out of it, but having them have just a short question and answer phase that tackles one of the topics, that makes them see what the value is in sharing personal details.
Yeah, something as simple as just sharing a story. You don't have to share your life story, but sharing a moment that you were challenged by, or better yet, a moment that really defined why you are, what makes you tick, whether it's a particular strength that you developed or something that you truly value, because how else is anybody supposed to know? We're not mind readers, so it can all, you know, it can build trust, but at the same time, it can help inform your relationship dynamic
Yeah.
moving forward, just having that awareness of where somebody else is coming from. So we're going to shift gears a little bit out of that, but not completely out of the river of life spectrum. So I want to ask you if you've ever been in this situation before. You're at work and your manager or team member or somebody approaches you and says, oh, hey, in a few minutes we have that all hands meeting, and I wanted to know if you could take this complex project you've been working on and give a 90-second sort of breakdown of the update. And it starts in 5 minutes. Has anybody ever been in a situation similar to that? I see some nods. Yes. So you have this really complex project you're very embedded in, and you have basically no time to communicate it in a quick, concise, and compelling way. So do you think that might be a useful skill to work on? I know that's a very leading question. Just a touch. So we're going to do just that. So we're going to spend the afternoon focusing on that. But guess what your complex project is that you have to communicate? Your river of life partner.
Your life.
So, I won't, you know, I'm not going to hang you out to dry. I do have a recommended structure to help inform how you can do that. But in a moment, I'm going to give you a break and give you a chance to think a little bit about it. But this afternoon, I'm going to give you the opportunity to take 90 seconds to essentially present the essence of your conversation that you had with your partner after hearing their river. And this is the recommended structure that you can use. So when I think of name of your river of life partner, I think of a metaphor, because, and then name 1 to 2 strengths or values that you picked up from their river, and then give an example of what you heard. So if I were to do this based off of somebody that I knew, an example would be, when I think of Kate, I think of a lighthouse, because she's such a beacon of light for people. They're drawn to her, and at the same time she's so grounded. And I think that combination of being grounded and being a beacon of light is why people go to her. Because she's reliable, but she's comforting and easy to seek out. And what stands out for me from an example of her life is when her mother was sick with cancer, she took over as the primary caregiver for her. And not only was she that beacon for her mother, but she was also that person for her siblings when they wanted to reach out and see how things were going with her mother. She was that conduit for them. And that's why I think of a lighthouse when I think of Kate. So that's a snapshot of what that might look like. So describing how they are as a metaphor, listing off a couple of strengths or values, and then sharing a brief snapshot from what you heard and from their life as part of that. So in a moment, we'll take a break, and it will be about 10 minutes. And in that 10 minutes, you can start to think about what you want to say, but we're going to purposely practice little preparation for this. But at the same time, I want you to be able to think about what you want to say. The very first thing I want you to do is check in with your river of life partner and make sure that there's nothing that's like off limits. So if you say, oh, I was comfortable sharing this with you two, but I preferred the group not to hear, share whatever you want to kind of cross off the list. That's absolutely fine. And then just start to brainstorm in your head of what you might want to say, and we'll practice getting it on its feet. But before that, we're going to do a quick focus on breath and voice before we get there to help warm us up before our final presentations of the day. Any questions?
So
you would probably do Carl. Carl, if you don't mind, you'd have 2 people presenting
That's
about
fine.
you.
Evaluating.
But if you want, I'll also give you liberty to present me if you want, whatever, if there's one, it doesn't matter. But then everybody else would present who they heard. All right? So let's take 10 minutes, let me look at my phone, because that clock is off. So it's 3:34, so let's come back at 3:45. And please check in with your River of Life partner first, and then when we come back, we'll move on to the next phase, all right?